One thing, Elvin, I'm diving to ask you about, which I know is going to be really difficult to be able to answer, and I struggle with trying to answer this thing myself with doing this. But can you walk us through a day in the life of what an instructional designer does for the Army University?
I would have to describe like five different scenarios. So it's a really tricky question. I'm sure you posted to
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Um, the way I would explain it before I explain a a day is each day kind of corresponds to a part of the ADDIE process. So depending on the project and your focus for the day, you might be doing more analysis or more design or more development, implementation, evaluation. It just depends on the priorities and kind of how things align in time and space, right? So, I mean, you're probably more interested in what a heavy development day would look like, because I think that's kind of what people are thinking of.
I mean, at this point, you mentioned about analysis, but it doesn't get talked about enough. So, by all means, if you want to describe a part of your analysis day of what the research actually entails and what it looks like, I'm interested in everything if I'm being honest here. But whatever you want to dive on into, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the great thing about working at Army University, and by the way, I'll throw this in there. I'm not speaking in the official capacity for Army University. I'm doing this in my own time right now, but I'll talk about my experiences. Is that each day is qualitatively different, right? Like that is part of the joy of the job, depending on the project or what you're working on or the problems you're trying to solve, because it really comes down to problem solving. Each day is going to be different, but some days are more similar than others. That being said, what does a typical day look like? Um, well, I'll start with analysis. So a day that I would say is focused on analysis. So this would be a day, let's say we work on an annual cycle, right? So our curriculum gets looked at on a yearly basis. And so if it's, say it's October of this year, the beginning of the fiscal year, okay, we've just pushed out a set of courses. We are looking at evaluation data that's coming in, and we are looking at what is working and what is not working. You know, cool thing about working for the government is, you have a lot more time on a lot of these projects, right? So I'm working on a year cycle. It's October. I want to know before I start doing any work, like, what are we working on? What do we have? And what is working and what is not working in all the course where we're pushing out? What that actually looks like, we'll work with some of we have an Office of Institutional Research and Assessment, and we'll work with them to pull in all SCORM reports, XAPI data if we have it, like self-report surveys, whatever, and then we're pulling all this data in, and we're just trying to get a picture of of what's working and what's not working. And so, that could easily take, 2 to 4 weeks, all of October, and a day looks like come into office, 8:30, check your notes, have your meeting, and then you're looking at the data. You're looking at what are the students saying. You're looking at what what learning outcomes have been met, kind of what interface features are having a good impact and what's not. And that seems to be easy, and that's why we gloss over it, but it's not. You got to sit down and dedicate time to it, because you have to be able to answer what parts of your courses are working, what parts of your courses are not working, where have we made progress, where have we not made progress, and why. And that causal piece is really tricky. I mean, you can kind of make it up and maybe you get away with it, but that's probably not the best way to do business. So that's an analysis day.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said all those things. By the way, no, none of that's ever easy. That's kind of funny
Right.
that it's always this like, oh, it's easy to do. It's just like, no, because of course you're interpreting the data too, and sometimes you interpret it incorrectly. So then you have to do more research to be like, well, then why did it come out like this? And like, okay, now I need to follow. I mean, I know for me, when thinking about it from that analysis portion about everything, I do both. I do both a quantitative and a qualitative approach because I have
Right.
found that oftentimes I'll get the quantitative answers and I'll know about at least 75% to say like, okay, I got it. I need to go in this direction. But then there's that 25% where I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to be guessing. So can I now bring in some people as far as for focus groups and interviews and whatnot, or for observation, whatever it is, to be able to say like, okay, how can I really go and take this to that next step? So that makes sense. about it from an analysis perspective. Actually, I'm really curious. How do you conduct with evaluations? You mentioned about that, but you're going to be taking in evaluations and everything. How do you do evaluations? Do you do typical things as far as for with the surveys and with everything else, or do you do more with things as far as with interviewing your past students or from instructors, or how do you do that?
It'll depend on the project and what resources we have available. For our captain's career coursework, which we do invest a lot of work in, um, we'll do a few things. So easy stuff, pull all your data from the learning management system that you can, like, and then embed surveys within the course. That's easy, low hanging fruit. Like Kirkpatrick, probably level 1 and level 2 stuff. And then from there, we're sending researchers out to like the schoolhouses because we have the added benefit of the learners are going through a phased model. So we know that at some point we will have them physically available at a school and Army installation. And so because of that, it's, we're fortunate enough to send researchers and say, okay, you took this class 3 months ago. Let's get you in a focus group. What are you working on? What are you not working on? That, like, because you're like, it's still a gap. You didn't really transfer it. Things like that. So we because we're structured, the follow-up is relatively easy for us as long as we put the money towards it. And so it's the quantitative stuff from like, the LMS plus the qualitative stuff. And plus we do like a biannual, like a called the survey of the Army Learning Enterprise. And that gets us some more macro level, like are you using it in your job, like Kirkpatrick level 4 type
Yeah.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. 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 That makes sense.